Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Very happy to be here and to share with you a very early part of a new novel that I'm writing. And this novel is, well, I will tell you what it's about. If there is any time at the end, and I have time, I'll tell you. If I started telling you what it was about, you wouldn't hear the reading. I'm so glad to see your faces. I have grandchildren, and just about your age. Two of them, they're a little older, and one that's 6. So, this story is called Moses Kingsley. It's called Moses Kingsley. This is chapter 1, and it's entitled The Dry Season. Moses Kingsley ran towards the concrete bridge spanning the narrow canal. His heavy school bag bounced up and down against his right thigh. He glanced over his shoulder, expecting to see Jonesy Cobb, also known as Cubbo, running barefooted down the street, waving his remaining tennis shoe at him. Moses saw with relief that the street was almost empty, except for an old man sitting on a box selling unripe mangoes and peppered salt from his cart at the corner of Queen Street and Barracks Road. It was Friday and the end of the school year. Classes had let out early, and Moses had gone to play marbles in a yard adjacent to the canal not far from his home. In the game, he'd lost his lucky dubs, the size of a green plum, to Cubbo, an older classmate, who had won it fair and square. Moses wouldn't have minded losing the big dub so much, except that the boys had laughed at his obvious disappointment and dismay. The big dubs had never let Moses down before. It was his magic marble, green and blue, all swirling together like the sea in good March weather. "Teach you to play with men, Moses, you big baby," Cubbo had said. "I'd play you another game, but I'd only beat you again. Then you'd have something to cry about." The younger boys, about Cubbo's age, joined in, laughing harder as Cubbo pretended to do a dance, stretching out his arms, swaying his body from side to side, and repeatedly stamping his bare feet in the dust, chortling in triumph. "I beat you, I beat you." "Who's crying?" Moses asked. But he could feel tears streaking down the dirt on his cheeks. He'd so badly wanted to belong to the group of boys who together regularly stayed after school to play marbles, spin tops, or to fly kites. He'd hoped to be one of their friends. But these boys were tough. They didn't cry when they lost the game. Looking at Cubbo prancing around the yard, Moses thought that all Cubbo lacked right then was a giant painted mask topped with foul feathers, jingling seashells tied around his knees, to look and sound exactly like one of the Junkanoo revelers who dance around Belize town on New Year's Day. But paying Cubbo a compliment, no matter how backhanded, was the last thing on Cubbo's mind. He was trying to think of something to say that would really get on Cubbo's nerves. So he laughed, wiping away the tears on his face. He pointed at Cubbo gyrating around the yard. "You look like a big booby, Cubbo." Moses had never seen a booby bird, but he'd heard that they had splayed red feet and were not too bright. He imagined that they must waddle along like ducks. "Booby," he said again. "You stupid old booby." Moses picked up one foot of Cubbo's muddy tennis shoes with a hole in the toe and flung it high over the fence into the canal. Cubba lunged through the ring drawn in the dust and grabbed Moses' shirt tail. But he wrenched himself free and dashed down the narrow pathway between the house and fence bordering the canal. He slipped through the broken palings into the street and ran as fast as he could. He imagined as he ran that he was grasping the reins of midnight. On Cubba's head was a white helmet with flying white plumes. His white suit was starched and immaculate. His brown polished boots gleamed. They left the chasing hordes behind in a cloud of dust. Ahead, the crowd of people parted to let them through. Once he reached the bridge, he stopped, the stitch in his side forcing him to lean over the iron railing until the pain eased. However, he stayed alert, looking about him as he tried to catch his breath. Midnight had vanished, as he always did, in the face of reality. He peered into the murky depths of the canal, reluctant to breathe in the stench that filled the air during the heat and humidity of the afternoon. He licked the sweat, salty and sandy, sliding down his face, willing his heart to stop pounding in his chest. He glanced again up and down the street, fearful of spying Cubba, tall and lanky, lurking in the doorway of a nearby grocery shop, ready to dash out and pounce on him. Moses could almost feel Cubba's huge fists smashing against his cheekbones and taste the blood dripping down his cheeks and chin. He looked down into the canal again, filled with old shoes, kitchen scraps, boxes, cloth bundles, tree branches, and tin cans. But he couldn't see Cubba's tennis shoe anywhere. It had disappeared amidst the garbage and human waste, impeding the flow of the water which emptied into the Caribbean Sea. A few weeks before, someone had thrown a sharp stone at him just as he emerged from Sabido and Sons grocery and dry goods shop on Hyde's Lane. He dropped the paper bag of white flour, which luckily for him had not burst completely open to spray flour all over the entryway. Moses had not seen who attacked him. The stone had cut him above his right eyebrow. The blood had dripped from his face onto his white school shirt and his khaki shorts. The scar was still there. He didn't mind the scar, but the stoning had increased in him a fear of the streets. Chapter 2. Nowadays, he didn't often dawdle along the streets of Belize town as he used to do, staring at skinny mules or tired horses frothing at the mouth, or at mangy dogs, tails between their legs, or well-fed ones barking ferociously behind high picket fences. Thinking now about Cubba and his tennis shoes, Moses began to wonder at himself. How could he have done such a thing? He had to admit in his heart that he too was changing in ways he hardly recognized. When he was younger, he loved to pause in the doorways of grocery shops, inhaling the mingled aromas of pig's feet, pickled in brine, onions, garlic, and musty crocus sacks filled with rice, red kidney beans, or sugar. Or he'd buy a shaver of ice dripping with brown syrup from the fresco vendor, who seemed not to care whether he bought the shaved ice or not. That was how the town seemed to him then, small and slow, rainy when it should rain, hot when it should be hot. He'd leaned against a wooden shop door, painted brown, sucking on his shaved ice, which to him tasted like a bit of paradise. He'd often climbed onto the imported boxes of Australian creamery butter or tin bacon from the United States of America, staring at customers purchasing slices of Dutch cheese preserved in a red and waxy substance, or black tea from England. His Aunt Mary, who read a lot, said that tea plants, as far as she knew, didn't grow in England, no matter what the packet said. I thank you.